In the early hours of December 29, 2017, the stillness of Gualeguaychú, a quiet town in Argentina, was ruptured by a chilling discovery. A 20-year-old man, Fernando Pastorizzo, was found lying on the pavement lifeless. He had been shot twice. One bullet entered through his back, the other pierced his chest at close range. His black scooter lay beside him, untouched. His belongings were still on him. There were no signs of theft. At first, authorities considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong, but the scene didn't match the motive. The lack of missing items shifted the direction of the investigation almost immediately. This wasn't an accident, and it didn't appear random. By the time the news began circulating, Fernando's name was already trending in local media. But just hours after his death, a message on social media caught the public's eye and sparked a wave of suspicion.
5 years together, fighting, going forward and coming back, but always with the same love. I love you forever, my angel,
Wrote Nahir Galarza on her Instagram account. The timing was startling. Her boyfriend had just died, and yet the tone was oddly composed, almost romanticized. The caption was paired with an old photo of the two smiling together. Many thought it might have been grief, others saw something else: detachment. At just 19 years old, Nahir was a law student. She was also the daughter of a local police officer, Marcelo Galarza. That morning, according to official reports, she approached her parents without resistance, without apparent panic, and she confessed. She had taken her father's 9mm pistol and she had used it. It didn't take long before she repeated her statement at the police station. Her tone, officers noted, was calm, steady, at times disturbingly so. Meanwhile, surveillance footage began to emerge. At 5:22 a.m., just minutes after Fernando's estimated time of death, cameras recorded Nahir walking home alone. She wasn't running, she wasn't crying, she didn't appear shaken. The footage offered no sound, but the image was striking. She moved through the street with an eerie composure, as if returning from a routine errand. This would be the first of many moments in the case that confounded the public. A young woman grieving publicly, yet implicated privately. A confession given freely, yet with no trace of remorse. A murder solved in mere hours, yet followed by years of controversy. From the beginning, nothing about this case felt simple. Before the murder, before the trial, before Argentina knew her name, there was a relationship. It began when Nahir Galarza was just 14 years old. Fernando Pastorizzo was 16. By most accounts, it was the beginning of a long, on-again, off-again connection that would last for nearly 5 years. Though some would later dispute the seriousness of their bond, evidence would show otherwise. In 2016, Fernando joined Nahir and her family on a trip to Brazil, a gesture that contradicted claims that he was merely a casual acquaintance. Photographs from that vacation captured what looked like a couple embedded in each other's lives. Fernando appeared in family pictures, stood beside Nahir in tourist spots, and shared meals with her parents. Whatever problems their relationship faced, distance wasn't one of them. Behind the smiling faces, however, there was tension. In 2017, a series of WhatsApp messages, later entered into evidence, revealed a darker dynamic. Fernando had reportedly expressed fear of Nahir's behavior. In messages to friends, he described feeling trapped. He even referenced physical injuries allegedly caused by her. These messages painted a portrait of a volatile relationship. Friends would testify that Fernando often felt anxious and conflicted, unsure how to break things off without repercussions. As the investigation progressed, Nahir's legal team would shift the narrative. She had been the victim, they argued. Fernando, not her, had been violent. In later testimony, she claimed to have endured psychological and physical abuse at his hands. But the court rejected those claims. Judges found the allegations lacked credibility and were unsupported by evidence. The accusations were ultimately dismissed. Whether she had been afraid or attempting to reframe the events, the courtroom drew its own conclusion. Then came the incident on Christmas night, just 4 days before Fernando's death. According to reports, Nahir was seen with another man at a nightclub. When Fernando confronted her, an argument erupted. What followed, as alleged by witnesses, was a physical altercation. Nahir, along with a friend, allegedly attacked Fernando outside the venue. The scuffle was brief, but significant. Friends claimed it marked the final breaking point. Fernando had finally decided to end things for good. The emotional tone of their relationship had become increasingly unstable. There were confrontations, accusations, and rumors. At times, Fernando seemed unwilling to walk away. Other times, he appeared terrified to stay. It was a cycle neither seemed able or willing to break. Despite the volatility, Nahir continued to maintain that their relationship was casual. Fernando, on the other hand, had left behind a trail of messages, photographs, and testimonies that suggested otherwise. For the prosecution, this disconnect was key. The law required proof of a bond between perpetrator and victim for the charge of homicidio agravado por el vínculo, aggravated homicide by bond. Years of interactions, family trips, and emotionally charged exchanges all pointed in one direction. This wasn't a passing fling, it was something deeper and far more dangerous. By the time Nahir Galarza entered the courtroom in June of 2018, the country already had its eyes fixed on her. What began as a swift confession had turned into a public reckoning. But in the courtroom, facts, not feelings, would carry the weight. On June 25th, Nahir took the stand. Her story had changed. She now claimed that the shooting had been an accident, twice. She described a struggle, a loss of control, and a gun that fired on its own. She also alleged that Fernando had abused her, emotionally and physically, framing the crime within the context of gender violence. But the court required more than words, and her words were not consistent with the evidence. Javier Azcue, the ballistics expert called to testify, addressed the technical feasibility of her claim. According to Azcue, the odds of 2 shots being fired by accident, particularly the second, which struck Fernando in the chest at close range, were almost non-existent.
In my years of experience, I have never seen or heard of any person shooting twice by accident.
He stated, undermining a core pillar of the defense. His testimony stood as a methodical dismantling of Nahir's narrative. The trajectory of the bullets, the spacing between shots, the mechanical reliability of the firearm, all contradicted the version she presented. As the trial unfolded, another key witness emerged. Gabriel Cartagna, a psychologist initially hired by the defense, was expected to support claims that Nahir had suffered trauma at the hands of Fernando. But his testimony took a different turn. Cartagena told the court that Nahir was manipulative, emotionally cold, and capable of strategic deception. He said that she did, in fact, have a stable relationship with Fernando, contradicting her later claims that they were never truly a couple. He concluded, in no uncertain terms, that her behavior didn't fit the profile of a battered victim. In a remark that would be repeated in media coverage, he stated,
Ni siquiera le llega a eso. Quiere serlo, pero no le da el piné.
Cartagena was subsequently dismissed by the defense and barred from presenting his full clinical report. But the damage was done. Throughout the trial, Nahir's version of events continued to shift. She denied the relationship with Fernando despite years of photographic evidence, WhatsApp conversations, and testimonies from friends and family. She painted herself as a victim, but without the corroborating details that such a claim demands under judicial scrutiny. The prosecution countered with a unified argument. This was not an accident, this was not self-defense, and it was not a short-term liaison. It was an established romantic relationship, one that satisfied the legal criteria for homicidio agravado por el vínculo, aggravated homicide by bond. On July 3, 2018, the court delivered its verdict. Nahir Galarza was found guilty of aggravated homicide by bond and sentenced to life in prison. The judgment made history. At just 19 years old, Nahir became the youngest woman in Argentina to receive a life sentence. But more than that, the ruling brought clarity to a case clouded by contradictions and shifting defenses. Her legal team would go on to file appeals. Media interest would only intensify, and Nahir herself would return to the spotlight again and again. But in that courtroom, on that July day, the law had spoken, and it had not believed her. As the trial unfolded behind closed courtroom doors, another spectacle was taking shape outside, in full view of the nation. From the moment Nahir Galarza's name was linked to Fernando Pastorizzo's murder, her image became the centerpiece of an explosive media storm. Television anchors dissected her Instagram posts. Tabloids published grainy photos of her in court. Opinion panels debated her demeanor, her privilege, and her guilt, sometimes all in the same breath. It didn't take long for a nickname to emerge. She was dubbed El Bombón Asesino, the killer bombshell. The phrase spread rapidly, appearing in headlines, talk shows, and viral posts. What should have been a sober legal process was recast as a tabloid melodrama, complete with a villain, a victim, and a public desperate to assign blame. Every element of Nahir's life was mined for intrigue. Her diary, once private, was leaked to the press. Intimate details written during adolescence were read aloud on national broadcasts. Entries about love, anger, and confusion were now reinterpreted as evidence of a twisted mind. The boundaries of ethics blurred. Public interest overtook privacy, and in the rush for ratings, speculation was often presented as fact. Outside the courts, the case ignited a wave of demonstrations, but not the kind many expected. On July 2nd, 2018, protesters gathered with signs denouncing gender bias. One banner read, "Fear will change sides." It was signed by a group called Todo Preso es Político. Many of these protesters weren't defending Nahir. They were questioning the broader conversation. Was the public so eager to believe her because she was young, blonde, or upper middle class? Was Fernando's status as a male victim being overlooked? The answers, like the case itself, remained divisive. Gustavo Pastorizzo, Fernando's father, gave a statement after the sentencing.
The only winner here is justice. Today, justice won. The truth won. Fernando is no longer with us, but he leaves a precedent. The verdict is a caress for my soul. I don't feel relieved, but I feel at peace.
His words resonated far beyond the courthouse. To some, they represented closure. To others, they highlighted just how fractured the public had become in interpreting the events. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Nahir's legal team pursued a different kind of strategy. They hired a celebrity PR manager. His task? To soften Nahir's image and to shift public perception. Part of that involved recasting Fernando's role in the narrative. Reports surfaced of attempts to cast him as jealous, possessive, even dangerous. The manipulation worked, at least in part. While many still saw Nahir as guilty, others began to see her as misunderstood. Fan pages emerged, so did calls for clemency. The narrative was no longer about justice. It had become a brand war. Perhaps no moment captured this better than a segment aired on national TV after her sentencing. A news anchor introduced a digitally aged image of Nahir, asking the audience to picture her after serving 35 years in prison. No legal update, no policy discussion, just a projection of her face, edited to evoke pity or perhaps punishment. One anchor summed up the mood. It's what we want to see, actually. We want to see her repent. And with that, the spectacle continued. Not as a trial, but as entertainment. The trial ended with a sentence, life in prison. But the story of Nahir Galarza didn't stop at the courtroom door. In August 2019, over a year after her conviction, Nahir's legal team filed their first formal appeal. The appellate court in Entre Rios reviewed the case and its findings. They upheld the original sentence. No procedural errors, no signs of judicial misconduct, no room for leniency. That ruling set the tone. In March 2020, her legal team tried again, this time escalating the case to the Supreme Justice Court of Entre Rios. The outcome was the same. The conviction stood. Nahir Galarza remained the youngest woman in Argentina to serve a life sentence. The chances of overturning her sentence in Argentina were fading. Then, in early 2022, something unexpected happened. Nahir, with the support of her mother, Yamina Kro, made a stunning allegation. She accused her own father, Marcelo Galarza, a police officer, of being the real killer. According to her new claim, Marcelo had murdered Fernando during a violent altercation and forced her to take the blame to protect his career and their family. It was the most dramatic shift yet in a case already marked by contradictions, and it turned a courtroom tragedy into a family fracture. Authorities reviewed the accusation. They found no credible evidence, no forensic inconsistencies, no corroborating witnesses, no motive that held up under scrutiny. The claim was dismissed. Still, The accusation raised questions about strategy, about desperation, and about the boundaries between truth and manipulation. Behind the walls of prison, Nahir Galarza's life followed a different rhythm. According to reports, she began studying psychology. She painted, she wrote poems, she granted selective interviews and described herself as feeling free. In the same facilities where she once waited for her sentencing, she now tried to build a new identity. She saw this as rehabilitation. Others saw it as a performance. By late 2024, Nahir's legal team had filed a petition with the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, seeking a review of her trial, sentencing, and the media's impact on public perception. The hearing took place on December 29th, coinciding with the anniversary of Fernando Pastorizzo's death. Whether deliberate or symbolic, the date carried heavy emotional resonance. For Fernando's family, it reopened unresolved grief. For Nahir, it was a pivotal moment in her legal journey. As of mid-2025, no final ruling has been announced by the Inter-American Court. The petition remains pending, and a formal determination is still outstanding. Meanwhile, Argentina's Supreme Court upheld Nahir's life sentence in mid-2024, denying her first national appeal and effectively confirming that she must serve the full term, of which the minimum is 35 years. The case continues to spark debate, not only over the legal verdict, but also the broader issues it raises about media narratives, gender perception, and justice. Not just for what happened that morning in 2017, but for everything that came after, and everything it still represents.